Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Welcome to the Ask It podcast, a blend of spirituality, philosophy and psychology, which rather than providing answers, considers good questions. Welcome, wise ones. Today we talk to psychotherapist Jenny Lynn, and we embark on an expedition to expose the shadow within ourselves and within the world. We delve deep into many layers, beginning with Jenny's own experience of schizophrenia and her ideas about entity attachment. Her belief that if the shadow is not integrated, it leaves us ripe for entity attachment. We move into the wider world and discuss the power that is attempting global control and the possible role of Satanism in this agenda. Finally, we emerge back into the light and discuss the importance of connection to the land and each other, the growing community of the awakened, and our commitment to bring light back to the world. So, if we can just start then, I'll ask you what I ask everybody,
Right.
which is how would you introduce you?
I don't know, a chancer really. I don't know. I think, I trained integratively over 20 years ago, and I don't think we called it that at the time. We just did so many different models under this one teacher. He was quite a maverick rebel and taught us how to break all the rules and to keep to all the rules as well. So it was one of those unmissable experiences, over 3 years of intense personal development and intense study and experiential training. So from that point onwards, I've also practiced Buddhism for nearly 40 years now, but I think the combination of life experience, the training and the Buddhism has enabled me to see through people. In the sense of I can usually get a really good feel for what's going on with somebody quite quickly, and I suppose I've appointed myself a transpersonal therapist now, because I think that's what the essence of transpersonal is really. It's getting into the nub of it and getting a whole sense of the person rather than the problem. We're not just looking at symptoms, are we? We're looking at people and how they relate to the world and look around and the earth and each other. And I often think in some ways psychotherapy, hypnotherapy has become a victim of the symptomatic model of modern medicine, where we're just looking at symptoms, and then you get people phoning up and saying, "Oh, do you do weight loss?" And you think,
What's behind that?
please give me something juicier to work with. What's going on really?
And that's what I liked because I heard you on the Sheep Farm podcast, and that's what I liked. I liked the way you spoke about it, because you said you were talking really about the absolute core of what therapy is, which is connection, and you said soul to soul, and I love that language. And you were implying that actually that's all that's needed, and forget your techniques and forget your theory and all the rest of it, which we have to have a basis in, of course we do, but that really it's not really about that. It's about the connection, and everybody needs, absolutely cries out for that deep connection, and that if we can connect with somebody on that level, then healing will happen.
Absolutely. And most training is all about techniques and symptoms, whereas that soulful connection, that experience of being witnessed, seen, acknowledged, really experienced, there's no escape. You have to be experienced and witnessed with somebody. And I think the way we do that as therapists is we have to deeply search within ourselves, so that we have the capacity to sit in our discomfort and bear witness to somebody's tragedy or trauma or story, whatever they think is real for them. We have to have the breadth of personality, wisdom, spiritual connection, and connection with ourselves, because people are out of touch with who they are. They're trying to be something for society or somebody or something. They're always they're looking outside of themselves, And this is why people come to see us. I mean, gratefully, I wouldn't have a job if they didn't, but you know, they come to see us because they're looking for something outside of themselves to fix themselves. And essentially what we're doing is directing them back inside.
Yeah. And I do training, as I was telling you earlier, and particularly with I do a lot of work with schools and teachers, and they come in thinking that I'm going to tell them how to deal with troublesome little Johnny, you know, and all of our training is about what is it like for you and what goes on with you, and they're horror struck, you know, they really don't want to do that, they don't want to look at that. So did you always have this kind of expanded awareness as a child?
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think, to be gentle and fair to my upbringing, my parents were, victims of their upbringing. There was a lot of trauma. I think there's a lot of generational trauma going back, 3, 4, 5, 6, ultimately 7 generations. And one wonders what kind of trauma we went through in the early 1800s, around about, what was going on at that time that's been hidden. So I think, our family bear traumas that are, they don't even know where they come from anymore. So there has to be somebody who stands up and says, I'm not going to play that game anymore. And I feel that was me. There was lots of stuff in my teenage years that didn't make much sense, and I was really anti-conformist. I really didn't want to do what my parents had done, though that was all they wanted me to do, which was to work in London as a secretary or in banking or something, and I absolutely didn't want to do that. So basically I just rebelled. But academically, I just wanted to go to uni. They thought that was a terrible idea.
Because back in the day, not many people went to uni. Now everyone goes to uni.
I know, yeah.
But probably when we were at school, it wasn't.
No.
There were very few. It was like get out, get a job, start earning a living.
Yeah. It was. That was especially, well, I don't know what your background is, but especially from that kind of sort of working class made good kind of background. Don't worry about qualifications, go and learn on the job. But I think going back to the sort of spiritual awareness, I would say probably, I wasn't spiritually aware, but there was definitely something wrong with the world that I didn't like, and I didn't want to be like it, and I was seeking from the moment I could think about it even. Yeah. So always seeking. And then when I was 19 I went to Liverpool, and I met a guy there who practiced Buddhism. So after a lot of academic intellectual discussion, he sort of browbeat me into practicing, and years later, of course, I see the great benefit of that, and I still practice. It's just behind me, my shrine here, but so I still practice. So I think there were things that were happening in my early 20s that were connecting me up to ideas about, actually, I've got more influence than I thought I had. I just have to focus and chant and put my consciousness where I want something to happen, and things start to happen. So I was starting to marry that all up. And then, of course, as you know from Jerry and my chat with the sheep farms, that I ended up schizophrenic when I was 23.
Yeah. What led up to that?
Oh, trauma, just really real deep stress. I think I was carrying a lot of trauma from my father's side. There'd been a lot of mental health issues going back, some time on his side. And I had gone to university, or poly as it was in Liverpool at the time, and my whole value system was about money. So, for example, if I wasn't earning money and making myself useful, then I was a complete waste of space. So I was struggling with that kind of personal ethos, and then being in a situation where I had no money, and I literally had no money because my parents refused to support it because they wanted me to work in London. So, and I got no grant because they were earning too much. So I was literally trying to do something without any money, and that really, really brought into all of my stress issues.
So I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, that whole thing, because the standards that you measure by were not appropriate for you at that time.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So, what's the question now? What led up to it?
Yeah.
So lots of stress, lots of lack of centre, really lack of centre. Nothing inside strong enough to hold on to. Even though I was practicing Buddhism on and off at that time, I wasn't convinced enough of it to hang my life on it. I am now, but I wasn't then. So I was kind of being battered around by the forces of good and evil. We say a truly wise man does, I can't remember what it is now, but is not influenced by the seven winds, and the seven winds are fame, fortune, censure, disgrace or whatever. And I wasn't there. I had no real core at the time, because I was building that, coming out of an environment where money was all that was really important. I was trying to build my fortitude, my personality, my sense of dignity and self beyond those expectations that came to me as a child.
Yeah. So then you have this crisis, I suppose.
Yeah.
We could call it.
Yeah.
Were you diagnosed as schizophrenic?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened? Were you hearing voices, or what were the symptoms?
It's funny. I became really hyper. I imagined that everything I said was meaningful and significant. I remember writing poetry and thinking, wow, I've cracked the meaning of life,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Running around, I was really hyper, talking to people, and driven by something, aware that there were forces. I could feel the forces around me. Like there were times when, after I was admitted into hospital, I could literally feel influences and forces going all around me. So it felt like I was hypersensitive to all kinds of realms. Hearing voices, the psychiatrist used to ask me that stupid question, and I told them it was a stupid question. Because what are voices? Because for me it was bigger than just voices. But the sense was I could feel everything going on around me. I could feel people. I could feel what state of mind they were in. I could sense strange energies around me all of the time. It was like I'd been plucked out of so-called normality and plunged into this very alien, energetic, scary, unpredictable, I didn't know where I was type of environment, or mentality, if you like, because nothing was as I thought it was. It was all different and so scary, because I didn't invite it in. I didn't say, oh, let's go and do a bit of exploring. It kind of grabbed me. Yeah, but it's scary as hell. And I remember a priest coming in, and he came into a room on his own with me, supposedly to give me the benediction or whatever it is, I don't know. I thought I heard him swearing. He was touching my stomach and touching my back. I thought I heard him swearing, like conjuring. I might not have done. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I'd imagined that, or it was a voice that was coming through the priest, or maybe he was an abuser. Who knows? People are so vulnerable in hospital.
Absolutely,
so vulnerable.
Yeah. So, and I understand everything that you've said from the clinical perspective, obviously having worked in that. But when we look at your path beyond that, it's quite clear that this is kind of a spiritual awakening for you, isn't it? It's a crisis. It's where you're finding yourself. And it's interesting you say about trauma. I really feel, and there's been lots of literature about this, you'll know about that trauma blows us open, doesn't it? Blows our psychic centres open and makes us very sensitive. And what's really needed is people like yourself that understand that, to work with people rather than giving them the diagnosis of schizophrenia and taking them to hospital. Yeah. So how long were you in hospital for?
I was in hospital for about 3 months.
And then they released me on. I went back to my parents' home in Essex. I was in Liverpool at the time, and I was in hospital for 3 months, and then I was released into the community.
Care in the community.
And I was sent back to day camp, and drugged up, beyond the eyeballs, up to the eyeballs. And that made me feel so sick. And this is what Jerry talks about in some of his work, that, why do people stop taking their meds? Because they make you sick. And basically, whatever entity attachment you might have can't operate properly when you're drugged up.
Yeah.
But, anyway. So I came off my meds because I was so sick on them. But I was really, really fortunate. Something that happened in my life, whether it be the Buddhism, the trauma, or the fortitude, or the fact that my parents actually were quite, insensitive to what had happened to me. They didn't really understand what had happened to me. Whatever had happened, when I came off those drugs, I didn't look back. I just stopped. One day I just stopped because it made me so sick. And then I slept for about a year.
Yeah.
Deeply, every night, deeply.
Yeah.
That really helped recover.
So did you have a sense at the time, you said you felt all these energies around you, did you have a sense of negative entities? Yeah, you did.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
Tell me a bit about that.
It's so difficult to remember, but it was very dangerous. I felt it was dangerous, and sometimes they spoke through people. Sometimes I felt these entities were coming through other people. Sometimes I felt that the words that other people were saying weren't theirs. They came through. I can't even tell you what kind of thing at the moment, but I can remember various people that I used to know in hospital. There were certain things they said that were more meaningful, even though they were just comments or discussions, irrelevancies really, but very meaningful to me at that time. So sometimes I felt the entities were speaking through people, and they were generally positive when they were speaking through people, but there were also times when there was one incident where I was in the ward and there was a young woman further up, and I remember looking at her eyes, and I remember the thought came into my head, there's only a quarter of her here, the rest of it has gone. And I don't know if you know about soul retrieval, the idea of bringing souls back.
But tell the people that are watching.
Soul retrieval is just an idea that when a human being or an individual goes into trauma, part of their soul just disappears. It splinters off and goes because it's a way of saving the psyche from the trauma.
Yeah.
And we know that with mind control, the traumatic satanic ritual abuse, that it splits off.
Yeah.
And it just goes missing. And so soul retrieval comes from trauma, basically. Also soul splitting comes from trauma. And then there's a whole modality of therapy which is about bringing
that part back
of the souls back.
Yeah.
So I was in the ward, and I looked at this. I knew nothing about soul retrieval at the time, but I remember looking at her and thinking, there's only a quarter of you here. And she jumped out of bed, she ran over to me, and she dragged me to the ground by my hair and kicked me.
Wow.
Obviously she was obsessed, or she was possessed in some way. But she had obviously picked up what I was thinking or feeling or sensing, and part of her had split off, and what was left was just this very angry, possessed young woman. So things like that. So this is how I sensed these energies around me. There was quite a few different experiences now of where, I would think and feel something very accurately, and then it would just play out. It was like, instead of me being possessed by negative entities, it was like I was blown open and I could sense it all,
Yeah.
rather than them being attached to me. It was like I'd been so opened up that I could sense it all. That's how I would describe it.
Like an extreme hypersensitivity.
Yeah.
In all your senses and other senses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On every level.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so after this awakening, what happened? Where did life take you after that?
So after that, I was back in Essex. I lived in London for a while, in West London with some friends, and then I eventually moved back to Liverpool. I got a job in a normal industry, just doing, basic admin stuff, I suppose. But the reason I'd gone to Liverpool originally was to become a teacher. So when I was 29, which would have been 1993, I think, I went and trained as a teacher. So I got my postgraduate in languages, because my degree had been in German and Spanish. And I started teaching. So I never looked back. I just picked up with my life. My parents just, was grateful to see me out of the house and doing my own thing. And I didn't look back. So I never had to ever really go back to that place and experience that sensitivity again. But interestingly, I don't know if I mentioned this on the sheep farm, but I'd recently, in the last 7, 8, 10 years, I've been studying a guy called Malidoma Some, who wrote a book called Of Water and the Spirit, and he's written loads of other books. But Malidoma Some is an African chieftain, but he was raised in Burkina Faso, and at a very young age he was kidnapped by the Jesuits and raised as a white boy. And his tribal family knew that was going to happen, and they knew, because they do this great ancestral generational wisdom, they knew that he had to go and live with the Jesuits and be raised by them, because he had a role in life, and that was to come back to the tribe and to bridge the gap between deep ancestral knowledge and the modern world. So he came back into the clan or the tribe at the age of 18 or 19. He escaped the Jesuits, and as a result he hadn't been through his initiation ceremonies, because they all went through around the age of 13. So he was put through his initiation ceremonies when he was 19, and he describes all the different realms he visits, all the sensitivities and realms that he was having to go into, and all of the distractions within that realm, to that you had to get your training before you went in. You go in, the training is don't be distracted by these distractions, so that you can come out again. And some boys were lost to it. But he managed to go through his initiation rites, and at the end of it, now he says in a lot of his writings that people that hear voices or who are open to sensitive realms are the future healers. They're the ones that can bring the wisdom of those realms into the present and use that expansiveness, that spiritual awareness, to hold the space for those who are journeying.
Yeah, beautiful.
A bit like a shaman, I guess.
Yes.
But I wouldn't call myself a shaman at all. But I think...
I would.
Well, thank you. But I would just say that, that depth of self-knowledge and that depth of self-exploration, and that having been to other realms and come back, enables you to sit very calmly with those who are in a state of deep shock and disconnection with themselves.
Yeah.
For whatever reason,
Yeah.
So I think that, it just comes through.
Yeah, lots of things, lots of avenues to go down. So yeah, I share that with you in a very different way. When I was 21, I had my own breakthrough, however you want to language it. And I absolutely agree. There is something about the only skill I could ever own is that I can sit with another as you say, and witness, and not be scared or terrified or want to move away from that, and feel that very deep connection. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
So okay, so you and I we've been talking about Jerry. So for those that don't know who we're talking about, it's Jerry Marzinski.
Yeah.
And he is a guy from the States who worked for 35 years as a psychotherapist, particularly in prisons with some really hardcore.
Criminally insane,
Yes.
I think he calls them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his belief is that schizophrenia is always a negative entity attachment. I don't know if I'm fully there with him. I'm kind of on the fence. I think absolutely, definitely that's a possibility in a lot of cases, but I'm skeptical to say that every case would be an entity attachment. What do you think?
People have come to me since I've done the interviews with Jerry and such, with a claim that they have an entity attachment, and I will work with that if that's what they believe is happening.
Yeah.
I can't say absolutely or absolutely not, because there is so much stuff we don't understand about the spiritual realm. There's so many realms that we are not aware of, and there's so many different ways in which that interferes with us and our consciousness, that it's hard to say for me that it's pure entity attachment. But there are times when clearly there is some kind of parasitic attachment.
I think paradoxically, with clients, you have to build up an ego state, because one of the reasons that they have attachment is because they have a very weak sense of self.
Yeah.
Deeply traumatized, lost part of their soul on the journey, don't know which way to turn, are completely vulnerable to other people's opinions, other people's energies, other people's thoughts, see themselves as victims. We have to build the ego state. Paradoxically, a lot of this spiritual stuff is about bypassing the ego. No, not in my opinion. I mean, I don't know what yours is, but for me, if you haven't got a strong ego state, then you can't conceptualize, you can't work with the dark.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree, because Jung talks about the journey of childhood and adolescence and early adulthood is to build exactly that, build the sense of self, build the ego. And only when we've got a strong enough ego can we transcend that and walk through those other realms, because we need something strong and solid to come back to. And if there's no sense of self to come back to, you're so fractured.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you've raised that, because we call that spiritual bypass in transpersonal psychotherapy. And where people misunderstand the teachings of any spiritual tradition, really, and think that it is all about non-attachment. And but I always think, well, we're human for a reason. We've become incarnate for a reason. So yeah, I think that we have to go through that process first and get the sense of who you are as an individual before you can join into those other realms.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's funny because that's kind of quite counterculture. Everyone thinks you need to transcend the ego and bypass this and that. No.
Otherwise, we wouldn't need to be in this human body, feeling these human feelings. There's a purpose for it.
Yeah.
I think that's the purpose of the spirit incarnating, is because we can't feel without a physical body.
Yeah, exactly.
Physically and emotionally.
Yeah. This is the learning, modality, isn't it? This is how we learn, in this form.
Yeah, and I think that's what relationship is all about, isn't it? It's how we're reflected back at ourselves, how we're mirrored back at ourselves, what we find difficult in relationship.
Yeah.
That's where we learn. That's where we evolve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even, I've been through many epiphanies and, lives, if you like, within this life. But that idea of learning, that of passing through a portal that you can't go back through. You can never go back. Once you've stepped over that portal, you're in a new space. And that's at once quite scary, but energizing, because everything is new. And that's happened to me several times in my life. And everything feels lighter and clearer and more open, and you notice synchronicities more because you've shed so much conditional stuff that's been put in place. You know, like, you should be like that, you should be wanting that or doing this. You know, and suddenly you come home and you don't need to. You don't need to worry about what you should be doing, because you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's the only place you can be, right here, right now, in this moment, doing what's right, belonging to you right this minute.
Yeah, and then there's also less concern about what the other's doing, or what about the other might think of you, or any of that. Yeah. We don't need to get caught up in any of that.
And it doesn't matter what people think and say. It really doesn't matter. I do see people, you know, around me getting very angry and upset about what other people say and do, and I just, sometimes, you know, there's a need to be really strong and defend yourself, but most of it is just people's shit. You know, they're just, you know, who cares? I don't care, you know, what they think or what they are. You know, we've all got stuff to learn. We've all got to come through this, and we've all got to learn what we need to learn to stay true to yourself.
So you, in that regard, you spoke on the sheep farm a lot about working with your shadow.
Oh yeah.
And so, of course, I understand that absolutely as a therapist, but the guys weren't too sure what you meant at first. So talk to me about that. Explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
Well, what I understand shadow work to be is that there are parts of us that are, you know, ancestral, generational, familial, of our conscious, of our psyche, parts of our understanding of who we are that we just don't want to know. I don't want to see my selfishness. I don't want to see my ugliness. I don't want to see my narcissism. I don't want to see it, yeah? Because, that's not me. That's you, yeah? So instead of sit with my uncomfortable shadows, I'll project them onto you. That's much safer for me. I don't have to really look at my stuff. I don't really have to integrate all of those dark shadows of myself. I can just disown them and say, that's you, Lucinda. Yeah, you're the one. She's the one who's upset me. It's her fault. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very simple, in my opinion. You know, your shadow is just the parts of you that you've locked away and said, no, that's definitely not me, ever. I'm never angry. I'm never upset. I'm never sad. That's just not me. Yeah.
I never abuse my power. I'm not narcissistic.
Yeah, I'm not a control freak. That's not me. You know.
Why do you think that's so hard for people?
I think because we've been so externally directed and referenced that we, I don't know whether it's a condition of being human in this heavy world that we live in, this world of matter, or whether it's because we've been corrupted. I tend to think it's because we've been corrupted, by what I mean is that we have been over-focused on the material. You know, our whole scientific tradition in the modern world is scientific materialism. Yeah. So we have been absolutely over-focused on the material and the superficial.
And I think because of that, we don't look any deeper.
Do you think that happened by chance with the scientific revolution, as it were? Do you think that happened by chance, that we were more and more externalised, or do you think that it's been made that way to get rid of spirituality?
Yeah, it's been made that way.
To eradicate that.
Yeah, because
when you have a people, and we have a whole world, out of the 8 billion people on the world, we've probably got 6 billion that I describe as follows. When you have a people that have no roots, no ancestral knowledge, no roots into the earth, no tradition, no history, no deeper knowledge of their spiritual identity as a human being, then they're easier to control and manipulate.
Yeah, I agree. And just thinking about that makes me think about how, you know, it's not okay to have St George cross flag. For us, we're not allowed to say that we're English people. We're meant to be ashamed of that. And to get beyond that, again, I think that process has eradicated exactly what you've said, our connection to our land, our homeland, and everything that is, and our traditions.
Yeah.
And our traditions are mocked, aren't they? Like, so, for instance, Morris men, they're mocked, aren't they? People take the piss out of it. And instead of honouring that sacred tradition, is waking up the earth and bringing the earth to life and encouraging growth and fertility. That's what those traditions are all about. But we're not allowed to be proud now to be English.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, if you look at some of the Aboriginal people, they are intimately connected with their land.
Yeah.
That is their land. That is their ancestral land. That's where they're from. That's how they built up millennia of wisdom working with the land, the plants and the people and their customs and histories. And we're no different. But we've been ripped from the land. We've been taken away from our spiritual heritage. We have been subject to this world of marketing. You know, I know how to market, I'm sure you do. But, you know, this world of marketing is so powerful. It's absolutely bewitched people into believing what's important is the latest car or house. I mean, it couldn't be less important.
Yeah. And it's all illusionary, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and just the way people walk along, and me as well, probably, just walking along looking at your phone, we're just not in touch at all with even what the weather might be like.
No.
You know, and now we're prescribing for people with mental health issues, oh, get into nature. And so that's some great new wisdom and some great new discovery. Oh, nature makes you feel good. You think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is why, well, actually, I started growing food about, must be 9 or 10 years ago now. But I started growing food because I started to do my research, and I started to realise that we were disconnected and that we were in a precarious situation, that there were certain energies and, you know, entities around, whether they be real or like material or spiritual, that were stripping away all that was good for our souls and our bodies. Just take one really simple example. I teach classes of wild herbal and kitchen cupboard medicine, and last week I gave a talk on this. And in 2010, borax or boron,
Yes.
was made into a poison.
Yeah.
And yet we know it cures arthritic issues, psoriatic issues.
I have a teeny tiny bit every day.
Me too.
For my arthritis. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
And it works wonders.
Yeah.
I don't have joint issues at all. But if you believe these people, it's now poison.
Yeah.
But it's less poisonous than salt. Yeah, sodium, whatever it's called, sodium. Can never remember the name of the salt. But anyway, you know, common table salt. So you know, these things have been taken off of us. It's a natural element.
We've been systematically disempowered.
Systematically over the years, because it doesn't make them money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't enable them to control the narrative or control what it is they want. Now, so I think there's a definite, deliberate, I mean, for me it's unquestionable that, you know, it's deliberate that they've removed us from our heritage, our soil, our homes, you know, what's important to us as human beings, family, relationships. Look what's happened in the last 2 years. They've removed everything that was valuable for us, when we know that the figures did not support that at all that first year.
And also there's this idea that we can all live forever in a way, because death has been removed from our culture. You know, a couple of 100 years ago, you'd been laid out in your lounge and everybody would have come in and paid their respects, and children would have been around that, and now it's all hidden away, isn't it? You know, in hospital, and, you know, you're kept alive no matter what.
I think that narrative is changing. I think now they're trying to convince people that the right thing to do is kill yourself. I know in Canada they've got a euthanasia program that they're promoting quite heavily, that you get past your sell-by date and there's no point you being alive using up useful resources. They're normalising the death of children and the death of young people. They're putting up signs all over the place that it's okay to have a heart attack in your 20s because people do.
But we know why, because that's the result of
The you know what.
Yeah.
So
The arm spear, as the sheep farm guys.
yeah, bless them.
Call it. Yeah. And I've absolutely noticed that with the propaganda now. One of the things I go on about, one of my guilty secrets, is that after a long day at the clinic with patients, I watch soap operas. I watch Coronation Street and Emmerdale, and I have done for years and years and years. And that's the only mainstream TV I watch. And I noticed, even before the last 2 years, I noticed that they were really, it was real propaganda. And the first thing that caught my attention was when we were first paying by contactless payments, and that was advertised behind, in all the scenes behind them. And I thought, that's a bit odd, advertising that. This is a soap opera, you know. And now everything that's in the mainstream media is now promoted and propagandized by the soap operas again and again and again. You know, and recently they've had a young girl with fertility issues, and what we know is that this is going to cause a lot of fertility issues for young people. We've had a guy in his 40s suddenly having a stroke. And the list goes on. Trying to normalise, as you say. Oh, well, you know, it's normal for people to drop down dead of a heart attack.
But this is a brand new narrative. It's been launched since March 2020.
Absolutely agree.
So, you know, but people are bewitched by it. They think it's real.
And that's where people have been so removed from what our true heritage is as human beings on the planet. They believe this propaganda.
So why do you think, I've asked everybody this question when we got onto these subjects, why do you think there are those of us that just were like, no, from day one? And why? Because we're all different types of people from all different backgrounds, different levels of intelligence maybe. So what's your take on it?
Oh, this is something I really wanted to cover on the Sheep Farm podcast, actually.
Go for it.
But
I've asked lots of people that question, and I'm not sure there's one single answer.
No.
But I get the sense that a lot of people that are like us have had historical bumps with the system in some way. It could be that we've had a bump up against the system and that we've seen the unfairness, but it could also be trauma from childhood, because when you go into trauma, it blows you open, you see things differently. A lot of people are like that. I think we have in our Buddhist order a concept called bodhisattvas of the earth that are rising up in this time. And the bodhisattvas of the earth are people that are born to be here at this time. And they come through with clear vision and clarity and compassion. So they're people that rise up from the earth. I don't mean rise up in arms. I mean we are born in this time to bring this truth. Now that concurs with other spiritual traditions where we talk about crystal children and all of those, the indigo children and so on and so forth. That now is the time for a cohort of people to become conscious. It could be frequency based. It could be that our frequency is rising. I don't fully understand that. I do think all of us that are awake are very powerful, and that we do have the capacity to wake other people, but we have to reach into ourselves first. We can't do anything if we're just a mouthpiece. We have to know deeply. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, I can't understand how they can't see it. Why can't they see what's going on? Because you're not there yet either. You might see it intellectually, but you have to be at one with it. You have to come into a deeper place, and then you live it. You live your truth. You don't just spout it. You have to live it, and at that point people start noticing. But I think as well, why are we awake? and others aren't. Others have been hypnotised, deeply hypnotised by the media, by this superficialism of scientific materialism that has absolutely infected the global consciousness. This idea that there is no such thing as anything deeper than your car and your house.
If you can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, it doesn't exist. Yeah.
And I think that has been a problem. I don't know. I think a mix of trauma, brushing up against the system, the fact that we are meant to be here at this time. I think that's what's happening. I mean, I don't know if you've got any other thoughts. What do you think of yourself?
I don't know. I've gone through many different ideas about it. Even are there people that are more hypnotisable? But I know I'm very hypnotisable. When I've had hypnosis, I go very deep. So that doesn't kind of pan out for me. I really don't know what the answer is. I don't think anybody does.
No.
Do you think more people are awakening?
I think so, yes. I think it's inevitable. I think they are accelerating the programme. As you know, they're now bringing 2030 forward because 2030 is a bit of a long way away, and there is a risk of people rumbling the plan. So, yes, I think there is a danger that we could win the narrative, and then their whole smoke and mirrors will just disappear, dissolve.
Who do we think they?
I know.
They are.
Yeah, I know.
What do we think?
Yeah. Oh dear, what realm do we go into now? Because we've got to go into a different realm to talk about that, because this isn't just a case of manipulating a few, physical messages on what do you call them? Advertising boards.
Yeah.
This goes a lot deeper. So we have, I have no doubt there are very powerful entities that are behind this whole agenda, and they may well be extraterrestrial, and I mean extraterrestrial as opposed to coming from Mars. I believe there are entities and beings on this planet that we don't know intimately ourselves that have decided they want to change the way life is on this planet. It could be a satanic element, the dark and the light, because they have to come side by side in this realm, on this Saha world that we live in, this heavy world of matter. There cannot be light without dark, and I think the dark thinks it's going to win. The dark thinks it's going to take control of the people, and it's going to have what it wants, which is an AI, transhumanist set of lab rats that do exactly what they're told. I think it believes it's going to get that. So I think there's they at that level. So we are talking about energetic entities, potentially other species that are in charge. But I also think that there are some incredibly powerful men and women in the world who have just slurped up all of the Earth's resources for themselves, and now they're blaming us. Talking about, the various names that come out in the media, the Bezos and Soros and Bill Gates and all that business.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you've said that I haven't thought myself. And I suppose what's going through my mind is I can think of some very down-to-earth people listening to us and thinking, oh my God, they've lost the plot. But when you go down the rabbit hole, these things, they have a certain truth about them, don't they? Because for me, I look at these people, certain people in power, and they are not human. There's something not right about the eyes. And I've seen that in person when I've been working with people. And there's one guy I can think of now who suddenly flipped and got into his anger, and he was gone behind the eyes. Something completely different was looking at me. It was quite frightening. So I look at these people and I think, you just do not look human to me. Now, I'm not saying they're not human, but what I'm saying is I think that they're in league with demons, would be my language for it. And after all, is a demon different from an extraterrestrial? It's just words, isn't it, to name something that we don't know, but we know it's not us. We know it's not you and me. It's something different. And I've also gone down the road of, okay, that phrase of absolute power corrupts absolutely, you know, and you can think of Hitler and many other examples of extreme power and what that does to a human. But somehow that doesn't do it for me. Why would you want control? The audacity, the arrogance of controlling a whole planet and thinking that civilizations are like ants and you can just wipe them out and kill them off and control them. To me, that's beyond human.
You know, deep lack of wisdom. And if you look at control issues from a psychological point of view, we want control when we don't feel we have control inside.
Indeed,
yeah,
absolutely right.
So we'll place it on our environment and we'll say, right, as long as I can have control out there, then I'm in order in here. And I don't have to look in here because I've got everything under control. So this is really what's going on, I think, as well, psychologically, obviously, with these maniacs, but also, you know, potentially because they're so out of control, they're so vulnerable that they are prime targets for entity attachment. I mean, you know, evil works through them. It's easy. And they beckon it. With their ritual abuse and their satanic program, they invite demonic attachment. They want it. That's their God.
You know, to talk a little bit about that, and you've very nicely brought us to that subject, satanic ritual abuse. So talk about that, because there's lots going around that the powers that be, whoever or whatever they are, absolutely engage in satanic practices.
So it is global. It's everywhere. This isn't just me fantasizing or, you know, having watched one little video saying, oh, it's all global, it's happening everywhere, or being a Q follower. I'm not a Q follower. But over the years I've studied this, I have seen evidence of satanic ritual abuse globally, everywhere you go, at the highest level, listening to survivors, looking at some of the rituals that they go through, looking at the philosophy behind it, and understanding that this is how they summon their power. This is how they summon their power.
It's not new. It's been done for many centuries. Years ago, you know, even in so-called biblical times, they would sacrifice the firstborn for, you know, this is not new. It's just been pushed underground. But underground in the sense that the media, that is also part of it, cannot report on it, because they're not going to report on themselves, are they? So this is why we're full of this nonsense that's going on around the world at the moment. You know, this chaos, and you know, we don't want to look at we look anywhere but where it most needs to be looked at. So satanic abuse or the satanic realm is worshipped globally and worshipped by the highest paid people in society, or the highest earners, or the whatever. I did actually treat somebody once who he never mentioned it, and at the moment that I was working with him, I didn't know as much as I know now.
So basically they conjure. This sounds incredible, okay? I've had to do quite a lot of research, reflection and deeper knowing to come to this conclusion that there is a lot of conjuring going on. So they summon dark entities. They summon they twist the law of cause and effect to go with what they want the outcome to be. They think they can. They think they're working within the law of karma, whereby they sow a seed now and it blossoms in the future, which is basically the law of karma. They think they sow a seed now and it will blossom in the future, but the outcome is not their fault. It's because we've not challenged what they're doing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you know, they'll conjure what they want. Let's think. Okay, really simple example. When you hire a car now, you have to give your national insurance number. What?
Do you?
To hire a car? Yes. You have to give your national insurance number. What on earth do I need to give that for? I just want to hire a car. Now, they've put that out there and nobody said, well, I'm not doing that. There's been no outcry, nobody knows about it. But they've put it out there. So every time you hire a car and you give your national insurance number, you're agreeing to the contract that they've put out. You're agreeing to that. Yeah? And people don't realise that we don't have to do that. I mean, to hire a car at the moment, you have to. But the point being is, that's the way they slip in some of these rules without you realising that you are complying and conforming with their vision. Look at the credit card swiping. Yeah. First of all, you could just put your card in a machine, whereas years ago you used to have to put it in the machine and have a roller over it. Then you could put it in a machine and tap your number. Now you just have to touch the machine. The next job will be just the chip in the wrist.
Or you give your phone.
Or your phone.
And as you say, it'd be the chip in
and then the chip in the wrist ultimately.
Yeah.
So, you know, when did we agree to that?
Yeah.
We don't never agreed to that. It's just they've got such a powerful conjuring vision that they've managed to bewitch 90% of the planet to go along with that.
I link that to the whole health and safety movement. So back in the day when I was a kid, we'd play in the playground. Oh my God, health and safety would have a field day. The stuff we used to play on wasn't safe, and you know, all sorts of things. Many stories we could tell, both of us, I'm sure, about such things. And then gradually over time, health and safety's come in. And so we've all got used to rules, haven't we? Rules and regulations upon rules and regulations. So they've turned us all into sheep that just go, oh yes, we've got to obey the rule, and this is another, and we don't question it.
No.
And as you were saying, the only way that all of this hangs together is because we all agree to it.
Exactly.
You know, like if everybody, just with speeding cameras driving here today, if everybody just shot past at whatever speed they wanted to drive at, okay, everybody would get a notice, but there couldn't possibly be too many people to take to court. So it is just the fact that the majority go, yeah, okay, I'll agree to that contract.
Exactly.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
And that's where they get their power.
Yeah.
Because there's far more of us, ultimately, than there are of them.
Yeah.
And this is how they do it. And this is the conjuring. Whatever it is they're doing, they conjure the vision first. I mean, in Buddhism, we say if you want something to happen, paint a picture really clearly.
Really clearly. And that's
then
visualisation, isn't it?
Visualise it. And then your whole life will move in that direction.
Yeah.
They do the same. But they conjure what they want. And they perform rituals together. And they have these underground meetings. And, you know, I know it sounds incredible, but once you've done the kind of research that it takes to stand in that truth, you'll understand this isn't fantastical. This is real.
This is real.
No, I absolutely know that to be the case. Years ago, I studied runes, and runes aren't far more than just shapes and symbols, that they have a sound, they have an energy, etc. You can use them in divination and all sorts of things, and you can use them magically. And I was a member of the Rune Guild and went to this big conference, and you could do what basically amounts to a master's degree of runic study, and I'd embarked upon that. And I went to this conference, and it suddenly dawned on me that there was no spiritual growth with these people in the way that felt right for me. And they literally spoke about left-hand path or right-hand path. And simplifying it, the left-hand path is just to constantly develop the will to the point of being able to die and reincarnate consciously, because the will, the sense of I, is so far developed. And the right-hand path is probably where you and I are, which is actually, it's more about blending and being part of universal consciousness at some level.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we don't value our individuality,
Yeah.
and I'm certainly not for hive mind at all. I don't want to be a Borg, as you were talking about. But ultimately, you know, when it gets into those upper realms, I believe that we are all one consciousness.
I think the left-hand path is the path of separation.
Yes.
It's the sin, or the siniestere, which is your left in Latin and in Spanish. Derechos, I can't remember. Anyway, derecho's right and left begins with S and I can't remember. But siniestere is the left-hand path. Sin comes from siniestere, which is the separation. Yeah, the left-hand path, the separation of the spirit from the body or the soul. You know, it separates you. The right-hand path is the intuitive side. Now, interestingly, we've got left brain and right brain.
Yes.
So you've got left brain is very analytical, and right brain is very intuitive.
Yes.
So you've got this whole idea of separation going down the left-hand path. And I think this is where they are. They're separated. They've separated us from our heritage. They've separated us from the land. They're separating us from our spirituality. Anything they can do to keep our mind focused on trinkets and trivialities, yeah, things that don't really matter but serve their agenda. It's just, they're just wetting themselves about it. They love it. They love it. The way they control the masses is incredible. You know.
And do you think they just do it for the sake of power and for being able to do that? Why would you need to do that?
They've obviously got their masters that they worship, that want to, you know, this is where we go beyond the human realm and we look at who's in charge. But I think these people are just having a laugh. They're having a bit of fun. I don't think it's all going right for them. I don't think I don't think they can just put their feet up and relax, because, you know, like I remember Catherine Horton talking about, it's like whack-a-rat, you know, every time there's a little movement comes up, they've got to turn their focus and whack that one down and then that one. And I think humanity is rising up. I think the energy is rising up, and I think, you know, they want it to go in a certain way. They want I mean, I'm sure, in fact I know, they expected the anti-coronavirus movement to be much more aggressive and angry than it was.
Yeah, hate your neighbour kind of thing.
Hate your neighbour.
Yeah.
You know, all of us that were rising up against it, they really thought they wanted us to be angry about it. We were, but we weren't as well. We wanted to spread the love because we knew what they were doing was divisive and continues to be divisive.
Yeah.
You know?
And on those protests, I went to a couple, there was an overwhelming sense of love.
Yeah.
And it sounds really like, oh, hippy-dippy, but no, it was.
Yeah.
People, again, from all backgrounds, all ages, just walking in that sense of togetherness. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing was, like you said before, all from different backgrounds, all from different walks of life, but with one common goal, which is to defeat the darkness.
Yes.
To come together in light and to see if we can really hijack the narrative. We need the narrative. We need to blow holes through their narrative. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to blow holes through their narrative. None of it makes any sense.
When you can see, it's just obvious. It's glaringly obvious. It's like seeing a new colour. It's just absolutely right. Yeah. So, would you say that we are in a battle of good against evil, light against dark?
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, very much so. And I think, you know, even in recent months, you know, this evolution that we're all going through, those of us that are awake, we're going through our evolution too. We're not just suddenly arrived and
we're done.
We've done it now. You know, even in the last few months, you sort of realise, I've got to transcend all this bollocks.
Sorry, I was praised for swearing on the part.
No, go for it.
It's one of my things.
I don't mind a bit of swear. Yeah, I think all therapists swear.
Good.
Every therapist I know swears terribly.
Good. Let's own that part of ourselves and not put that in the shadow.
I don't mind. I like a good swear. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're agreed we're in a battle of light against dark. Talk to me about evil. How do you understand that? How do you personally understand that concept of evil?
I see evil as deeply, what's the word?
Traumatized. Evil comes from people and energy that feels unseen, unheard, unwitnessed, and very angry with life. Yeah. So people say, I've heard people say there is pure evil, which is not related to any experiential stuff. But whenever I've met evil as part of an entity in somebody that we're dealing with, all it really wants is recognition. Not as an evil thing, but we have given it power by shutting it away and saying, you're bad and I don't want you anymore. And when we put the light on it and we bring it out and we say, actually, I'm sorry I shut you away, I didn't mean to be so nasty, I'll embrace you now, evil disappears. It just goes. And you integrate it into your psyche, it becomes your truth, your whole then. Instead of this divisive shadow, that's not me, once you welcome it in, it becomes an acceptable part of you.
So I think if we look at it like that, you might say evil is as a result of disowning. We disown shit. It just goes, I'm not having that. You know, I'm disowning everything, including these psychopaths at the top. You know, they set us up to hate each other, to divide us. They love it. Because then I can say, oh, that person's BLM, they're, you know, left-wing woke, and that person's, you know, anti-climate change, they're right-wing fascist. You know, all of this divisiveness is evil. Going down the sin again, and the siniestri, the left path, it's all evil. All of this divisiveness, and it gains energy and power when you give it that kind of attention. Or lack of attention, whatever it is. You know, there's people that say, oh, this whole transgender thing is really important because we really have to be embracing of people with other genders. And you think,
hang on a sec, this, you know, because then you've got the people that say this is a load of rubbish and the people that say, how dare you? And I mean, how many young teenage girls in particular have I met or had to do with in the last year or two that are completely convinced that the whole woke agenda is just the way it is and it has to be that way. And you think that is just setting the youth against the adults because they don't want to trust the adults. It's just division everywhere you go. So evil, I think, is division from source. It's separation from source. It's the whole left path. It's the whole disowned shadow self. And when that happens, evil happens. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I agree with all of that. I also think that even little careless acts can be evil. You know, I think there's evil in me, there's evil in you, there's evil in everybody, and we were talking about the shadow. I do actually, though, think that there is an external evil that is nothing to do with human, and when my husband was dying, I saw light beings all around the room that some people would call angels. Again, it's what language do we use, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I absolutely know I saw them, like shadows, only made of light. They were featureless, but they were made of light, and they were about 7 foot tall. They were as high as the ceiling, all around the room, and I saw them again and again and again. And so I always trust what my own experience is, and I think, well, if I've seen beings of light, I absolutely believe that they are beings of dark, and I do. The idea of demons sits okay with me. So I do. So perhaps unlike what you're saying, I do see that there are external forces that are just pure evil.
Yeah, I suppose I want to believe that we can win the narrative. Do you know what I mean? I want to believe that where there's light there can be no evil, but maybe that's just wishful thinking, you know.
I don't know. I don't know. maybe it's not wishful thinking. Maybe that is because light penetrates everything,
Yeah.
doesn't it? You know, it's really hard to block out a room and make it pitch black, isn't it?
Yeah.
If there's a light source. Yeah.
But then again, we are in this world of duality where light and dark they
You
have to
have
live.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't know one without the other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the frequency of the realm that we live in.
Is that this heavy world of matter has good and bad to it. You know, arguably, we're in one of those realms, the ones that Malidoma Some went through as a child. You know, we're living in a realm.
Yeah.
We've been captured in this realm. And there are other realms that when we die, maybe we pass into a different realm. Or maybe we can travel now. With ayahuasca, we can travel into different realms. We can go there. You know, so maybe, you know, we are captivated in this realm of light and dark. And it has to be this eternal battle. But I mean, if you believe the New Age kind of spiritual people that we're moving into this 1,000 years of peace and the light will win and, you know, there's all that stuff, I can't say, oh yes, because who knows? Who knows? All I know is what I know and how I work. I try and work daily with what is rather than what
could be.
What could be.
Yeah.
You know, and if we all work with what is, and we reach into our deeper selves and keep summoning our own light and our own wisdom and our own courage and compassion, then you know, and we're living it right here, right now, we are living in a different dimension. We're creating a different dimension as we live.
You know.
Yeah, and we have to have hope. I mean, if you don't have hope, then you have nothing. That's a terrible thing, to have no hope. And you were talking about Rupert Sheldrake earlier, and his morphic fields, and that's not dissimilar from the idea of manifestation or magic. In other words, that you visualize, and if many people are of the same thought and of the same mind, then you're going to bring it. You can bring about, and if they can bring about something negative, then why can't we bring something you know, equally positive out about? Yeah.
I think, you know, they're very coordinated and very intentional, whereas we are less coordinated but more organic, in the sense that we are rising from the earth right now as bodhisattvas, and it's less organised and more chaotic and more feminine, because feminine is wild and unpredictable and chaotic, and you've had this domination of the masculine for centuries now, this kind of like, you know, it's got to be like this and very directional.
Yeah.
And I think this feminine energy is coming up, which is wild, you know, inchoate, chaotic, you know, beating to its own drum. And I think that's what's happening. I don't think any day soon we're going to roll, you know, defeat them and they're going to roll over these entities and these, you know, these satanic worshippers. But I think we have to live in the moment right now and bring that reality through. We have to bring through the new consciousness.
So you also mentioned another thing that might be in our favour, as it were, which is that globalism doesn't work because you can't control the whole planet in that way, and that systems that work are, as you say, organically grown small communities that can govern themselves and then join together into a bigger whole. So I'm interested in hearing more about that, and also the idea of how do we create small communities of like-minded people, because I know you've done
we're
something.
doing it, we're trying.
It's not easy because people are so wounded, and they really do not understand the layers of consciousness within themselves. They have ideas about how they think things should be and how others ought to be, but to integrate their own dark shadow self in themselves and accept and understand that this is a communication issue, not a blame game. You know, it's a communication issue, that takes a lot of maturity and a lot of work. And I think, you know, this is where the awakening community has a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do on integrating our shadow selves, of staying in a place of empowerment rather than the disempowerment that the divisiveness wants us to stay in. So I do believe that we have to go back to the idea of elders. We have to have elders who understand this stuff.
Who have done the work on themselves.
Who have done the
because
work.
otherwise we're going to play out the same as the powers that be, aren't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we haven't got elders that are deeply wise and knowledgeable, then we're all just like, you know, leading the blind by the blind. What's it called? The blind leading the blind.
Blind, yeah.
So I think we have to go back to that. Those elders, you know, maybe I'm one, maybe I'm not, but they tend to just rise up because other people around them realise that they've got wisdom. So there's none of this, oh, we vote her or him. No,
Yeah.
we're not campaigning for anything. The elders have to rise up and become the trusted go-to members of society. And and even then, the elders, you know, you have to have breadth. You have to have spiritual breadth. And you know, like I said to you, even the last few months, things are expanding so much. Everything's, you know, I'm so open to growing and evolving and changing and stepping into a new space. You know, none of us are the finished article. You know, so I think the community is the new communities that are coming up are very immature at the moment. They can work together on a certain level, but there's a lot of personal development that needs to happen yet before we're all standing in our truths and owning the bits of us that we don't like, instead of blaming other people for them. You know, You know.
So you said that you had a Kaylee, and you had 60 odd people.
We did,
all awake.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? How did you find the people? Because we can find each other on YouTube, or not YouTube now, but on different platforms, whatever. We can find people through podcasts. But how have you found people that are in your close vicinity?
Yeah.
I gather you know about Stand in the Park, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Stand in the Park is a movement globally, I believe, certainly in the UK. I think the website is standinthepark.com or .co. I can't remember now. But basically, across all of Essex, we probably have 10 to 12 stands, and in each stand there's probably well, in our stand in the winter, because when the summer comes people tend not to come, but in the winter we've got a good 20-30 people at our stand, and they're all connected to family and friends and such. So when we did the Kaylee, I think I put out some promo in 3 or 4 different stands, and I went and did a few visits to different stands to say, look, we're doing a Kaylee, come on, join in. And we had these 60 people in a room together, and the great thing about that was that they came from all different stands all over Essex, and they got the chance to connect and exchange numbers and know who does plumbing, who does electrics, who does food, who does... So suddenly we've got these communities that are coming together.
I'm so inspired by that. I'm so excited by that.
Really? Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So they're coming together, and like, you know, we just put a message out in our groups. Anyone know a plumber? Does anyone know, you know, can anyone advise on this disease or that disease? And, you know, my thing is mental and physical health. So people ask me questions, I put them in the group. The growing food as well. You know, I've got my own little tiny enclave, if you like, on Telegram, which is food growing, because I've run various online courses for food growing, because it's really, really important that we eat local, that we grow local, that if there were more food people that grew food, we would be much less vulnerable to food shortages, and actually healthier, because we'd be outside communing with nature. We'd be, do you know what I mean, eating food that we can only grow in this season at this time, instead of shipping in stuff from, you know, Gambia or Kenya or wherever. It grows here right now. That's the best thing for us, to eat what grows right now in our locality, because that makes us in tune with our environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore strong with it. So yeah, so the communities are coming together. I've got my gardening community, I've got my allotment community now.
I've got the community up at the woods. I've got the stand in the parkers, the Kaylee, the medicine community. So, you know, they're all finding each other. We are finding each other. And every now and again, new people show up, which is like, wow. Because there was a period of time over the 2 years when we were under so much pressure from all of this agenda that was playing out, that people were popping up everywhere and we were sort of embracing them.
Yeah.
And then they took the pressure off and people were like, oh, it's okay now. You know?
Yeah. People think everything goes back to normal.
Yeah,
Of course it
yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So and I'm always scooping people into the movement, you know. Even when I moved here, there's an older lady up the end who was a Christian, and one of the first things she said to me, I'm a Christian, and you know, we're in end times. And I said, oh wow, tell me more, before I sort of revealed my cards. And she said, all this rubbish that's panning out, you know.
She was like, and I went, oh wow, I'm so pleased to meet you, you know, because she's in her late 70s and she's aware.
Yeah. How great, how brilliant is that?
Yeah. And there are loads of people. Last 3 or 4 months, since they took the pressure off, people are coming out of the woodwork. They're confessing they haven't had the V. Yeah? And you think, wow, I would never have known that about you. But because the pressure's off and there's not this them and us anymore,
you're okay to say.
You're safe.
Yeah. Because I must admit, most people that come into my therapy room tell me that they've had the vaccine, and so I haven't met many people that haven't.
I've met hundreds.
Have you?
Yeah, hundreds.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But I do go out of my way to embrace all of those people.
Yeah.
Because they, honestly, you know, if we go by what happened in Germany, you know, how easy it was for them to marginalise the people they didn't want.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely right.
And we are safer in numbers. So the minute I meet someone that I know, I try and embrace them and claw them in. And
it's important.
Oh yeah.
It's important.
And even if they don't want to know, because there's a few people that are awake and aware but don't really want to be involved in a community building, I say to them, when you feel it's necessary, come and join us.
Great stuff. So it sounds like you're hopeful about the future.
Yes, now I am.
For quite some time, probably like prior to about 3 or 4, 5, 6 months ago, as I was saying, everything's growing in flux, I'm developing, things are moving. I think I was very, very defeated. I felt defeated because I thought these people, these entities were going to win. But now I see that they're going to have real trouble.
Great stuff. So, anything you want to tell people about?
We've been through the whole gamut.
Well, that's personal to you that you're doing, that you want to make people aware of.
I'm still working. Briefly, I'm re-establishing, relaunching my website, which is openmindtherapy.co.uk. But it's a bit of a mess at the moment, so you'll have to bear with me. But so I'm still working, and I can't see myself ever retiring. I don't see this job as a job.
No.
This is a joy.
Yeah.
It's a passion and a joy.
I agree.
And if I can help people on their way to integrating parts of themselves that they hadn't realised were there, and it makes them more empowered and strong, then my job is done, you know. So yeah, so it is a joy to do what I do. It's a joy to teach people how to grow food. I adore it. I love growing food. I love doing my research into medicine, natural herbals and kitchen cupboards. You know, I suppose I would love more and more people to become more connected with the earth, with their dark shadow selves, and to just be in our power, be in our rightful inheritance that is the earth and our land and our people, our psyche, our spirit, our soul, our food, our way of life. You know, I just want to inspire people to come into that place of calm, oneness, joy, connectedness, and real deep appreciation for life and each other.
Yeah, beautifully put. Because when you come right into that centre and you're in that real connected space, there is no need for anything else in those moments. You realise how frivolous all these, I mean, I love sparkly lovely things, of course I do, but you realise how frivolous they are. And that space is spacious. It goes on forever. Yeah.
It's nice to have trinkets, but just make sure that you know they're trinkets, and not your new god.
Yes, indeed. So can people contact you through your website?
They can, just about. I'm not sure if I've got an email address on there yet, but it's Jenny at openmindtherapy.co.uk. That's Jenny with a Y. And and my telephone number's there, so people can always ring me or text me, and then I'll pick up. But that's how people get me at the moment. Might change. I think the website will always be there, but it's just the ways in which people contact me. Might change.
Okay, well, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, if you like asking questions like me, please like and subscribe. Thank you.